Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtotra Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtotra Shata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Anatakoti Vaishnavinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Glories to the same devotees. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punyashravana Kirtanam Hridyantasto Hyabhadrani Vidhunoti Suhritsatam Nashtaprayeshva Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. Just quickly before we get stuck into the verse, I wanted to give and also ask for your forgiveness for being so disrespectful, actually taking this seat in such an unqualified position. The Vaishnavas, one of the qualities of Vaishnavas is forgiveness, so I beg for all of your forgiveness for any offenses that I commit in my talking up here. But yeah, I just wanted to also briefly give some broader Bhagavatam context before we get into this verse, because I was listening to a class by His Holiness Swayam Bhagavan Keshava Swami Maharaj, and I think he just mapped out the Bhagavatam really nicely, which helps me because I find it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, so many books. He was explaining, because we've just finished Canto 3, and Kapila Dev is instructing Mother Devahuti about lots of things, but kind of prominently we were discussing devotional service in the three modes. So Saguna Bhakti versus Nirguna Bhakti devotion, which is done beyond the three modes, right? Pure devotional service, uncontaminated. I found it really interesting, though, he was explaining that in Canto 4, where we are now, we get a practical example from Prajapati Daksha of what devotional service in ignorance, in the mode of ignorance, actually looks like. And then this will carry on into the next canto. We'll see Dhruv Maharaj, right? Dhruv meaning ambition, will be a practical example of devotion in the mode of passion. Does anyone know in the 6th canto then who will be the example of devotional service in the mode of goodness? King Prithu. Prithu meaning great, abundant. Anyway, we'll get to those pastimes when we get there. And then of course in the 7th canto you've got Prahlad Maharaj. So it's this kind of progression into pure devotional service through the pastimes after we sort of had that more analytical discussion between Kapila Dev and Mother Devahuti. So yeah, today we're reading from Canto 4, Chapter 3, verse text 4. We'll go more into the pastime after we read the verse, but Daksha, meaning expert, is in this sense connected to the devotion in the mode of ignorance, because being an expert, right, being in that kind of exalted position of leader of the Prajapatis. He is he is prone to pride, right? He has been, in the last verse yesterday, we were hearing from Bhavavibhushan Prabhu about how Daksha was becoming puffed up by the protection and the support that he had been getting from Lord Brahma. So when we take these sort of more exalted roles in our devotional service, we can become prone, like Daksha, to pride. And as Kapila Dev was explaining in the last canto, pride leads to envy, which leads to violence, actually, devotional service. These are the three gradations of devotional service in ignorance: pride, envy, and violence. So, yeah, we actually see that play out in that sequence in these pastimes here of Prajapati Daksha. Yeah, so with that we'll get started. Tasmin Brahmarshaya Sarve Tasmin Brahmarshaya Sarve Devarishi Pitru Devata Devarishi Pitru Devata Asan Kritas Svastyayanas Asan Kritas Svastyayanas Tatpatnyascha Sabhartrikaha Tatpatnyascha Sabhartrikaha Tasmin Brahmarshaya Sarve Devarishi Pitri Devata Asan Kritas Svastyayanas Tatpatnyascha Sabhartrikaha Tasmin Brahmarshaya Sarve Devarishi Pitru Devata Asan Kritas Svastyayanas Tatpatnyascha Sabhartrikaha. Tatpatnyascha Sabhartika Tasmin Brahmarshaya Sarve Devarishi Pitru Devata Asan Kritas Svastyayanas Tatpatnyascha Sabhartrikaha. Tasmin Brahmarshaya Sarve Devarishi Pitru Devata Asan Kritas Svastyayanas Sarve Devarishi Pitru Devata Asan Kritas Svastyayanas Tatpatnyascha Sabhartrikaha Okay, so the word for word. Tasmin, in that sacrifice. Brahma Rishaya, the Brahma Rishis. Sarve, all. Deva Rishi, the Deva Rishis. Pitra, ancestors. Devata, demigods. Asan, were. Kritaswasti ayana, were very nicely decorated with ornaments. Tatpatnyaha, their wives. Cha, and Sabhartrakaha, along with their husbands. Okay, so translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada ki. While the sacrifice was being performed, many Brahma Rishis, great sages, ancestral demigods and other demigods, their wives all very nicely decorated with ornaments, attended from different parts of the universe. In any auspicious ceremony, such as a marriage ceremony, sacrificial ceremony, or puja ceremony, it is auspicious for married women to decorate themselves very nicely with ornaments, fine clothing, and cosmetics. These are auspicious signs. Many heavenly women assembled with their husbands, the Deva Rishis, demigods, and Raja Rishis, in the great sacrifice named Brihaspati Sava. It is specifically mentioned in this verse that they approached with their husbands, for when a woman is decorated nicely, her husband becomes more cheerful. The nice decorations, ornaments, and dress of the wives of the demigods and sages, and the cheerfulness of the demigods and sages themselves, were all auspicious signs for the ceremony. Okay, so we'll do the Mangal Charan. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijanasahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nittinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna. So yeah, we were talking about Daksha and the mode of ignorance. Basically, in this chapter, we've kind of gotten to a point in that pastime now where the tension between Shiva and Daksha has been kind of festering for 1,000 years, as that 1,000-year sacrifice kind of came to an end. So Daksha has now moved on to the Brihaspati Sava. We saw kind of at the start in the previous chapter, right? So just to kind of refresh in case anyone hasn't been here for this pastime. Daksha enters in as leader of the Prajapatis. He's kind of leading this sacrifice to honor Lord Vishnu, and everybody stands up to offer him their seat, except for Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Lord Brahma is his grandfather, so kind of fair enough. But Lord Shiva, his son-in-law, is this kind of angsty, like, character covered in ash and stuff, right? And Daksha is kind of seeing this. He takes offense, and pretty much we're understanding that from the verse yesterday. Daksha had become puffed up, right? And it was this pride which led to this envy which he'd been harboring against Lord Shiva, because Shiva is the topmost devotee of Lord Krishna, and despite his kind of seemingly mendicant or what do you call it, like, just different way of carrying himself, Daksha, who is a very kind of paka, proper Prajapati, he sees this and he sees his title being kind of overshadowed by this character, so he develops this envy, and that kind of comes to its climax in the previous chapter. We see that envy then leads to violence, and he sort of verbally abuses Shiva. He makes these curses. So yeah, I think in terms of, like, for us, this is a really valuable lesson, because it's so easy to become proud in our service. Like, we get these special opportunities to kind of do something, beyond our usual kind of scope, and we think like we're making this genuine progress, we've achieved something, right? But actually it's all just the mercy of the Vaishnavas. But we become proud, right? Because it's just this natural tendency that we have as conditioned jivas. We become forgetful, and we're so used to this nature of enjoying, and false ego is separate from the Lord. So, yeah, we're told to guard against pride very carefully as Vaishnavas. We say humility is the beginning of all religion, and this is why, because when we let pride in to our intelligence, into our mind, it contaminates our bhakti, and envy, which is so damaging and causes Vaishnava parad, a major blockage to our progress in spiritual life. Again, it progresses in this way. And when we hear about Daksha, making these curses, it can sort of seem like, I don't know how to curse anyone. And the idea of devotional service in violence, it sounds a bit extreme. I don't think any of us are going to get into a physical brawl with each other here in the temple, but devotional service in violence can manifest more subtly, right, in little things like preaching in a way which disturbs someone's faith in Krishna, or something like that. And when it comes from that progression of pride and envy, we're really operating on kind of like the lowest platform of devotional service. So Daksha is giving us a very valuable lesson in that regard. Another thing I wanted to touch on is, in the purport, Prabhupada uses the word auspiciousness, like I think 4 or 5 times, and we're talking about the auspiciousness of the dress of women, and the auspiciousness of the joyful state of the husbands heading into this sacrifice. So I just wanted to sort of explore, like, what is auspiciousness, because we hear this word so much in Prabhupada's purports. And I actually remember when I first came to the temple, I'd been doing a Bhagavad Gita class through the last lockdown, and I was only coming in because I wanted to get more books, so I was just going to come in and pick up some books and leave, kind of thing. And we usually distribute Bhagavatam, thing like that, right? So I think it was maybe Kartik or something, and I came in and I had my big box of books, and I was really happy with myself. And this Mataji who I had never met came up to me and was like, "Oh, you're taking Bhagavatam. This is very auspicious. You're taking Bhagavatam on this auspicious day. This is very auspicious." And I was just like, "Oh, what is this auspiciousness? I'd never, never heard this word before." So yeah, Prabhupada's teaching me many things, teaching me how to speak my own language. But yeah, I think there's like different kinds of auspiciousness. Like if you look it up on Google, you'll get something like prosperous or like favorable. But this can be used in a mundane sense, like if we're doing kind of karma kanda sacrifices to please the demigods, right? We can do that on an auspicious day so that we reap a higher material reward for ourselves or for our, if we extend that to our society or something like that. This is kind of mundane auspiciousness, but Prabhupada uses auspiciousness in a different sense. When we think of, well, there's this verse from the fifth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which I haven't learned yet, but Bhaktaram yagya tapasham sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. So Krishna here is saying, one who knows me in truth knows that I am the supreme beneficiary of all sacrifice. So actually any auspiciousness that we encounter, even in the mundane sense, it's all being sanctioned by Krishna himself in the first place. When we please the demigods, the benefits we receive from the demigods themselves only come by the mercy of Krishna, right? Like man proposes, God disposes. Yeah, and so in that sense, Krishna is the, I mean, and one of Krishna's 64 qualities, right, is all auspicious. So Krishna is actually the reservoir of auspiciousness. So this is real auspiciousness. This auspiciousness which is, by definition, connected with Krishna, right? Krishna, anything which is connected to Krishna actually becomes auspicious. I was reading, Rupa Goswami gives a definition of auspiciousness. He says, auspicity is that which spreads for everyone in all parts of the world. That is auspicity, something which is not partial. And I immediately thought of Krishna, right? We hear in chapter 9, he says, Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshyosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mai te teshu chapyaham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. Even we can see there with the envy, like Daksha, who is characterized by his envy. Krishna is saying here he envies no one. In the second half of that shloka, actually, it's Maite is significant. When one renders loving service to Krishna, actually Krishna is in him and he is in Krishna. So we see with Shiva, the topmost devotee of Lord Krishna, he's constantly in trance meditating on the Supreme Lord. So he imbibes these qualities. That's why his name is Shiva, literally auspicious. He is imbibing these qualities of Krishna through his pure devotional service, the topmost yogi. And same with the free from envy. Krishna says, I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. We saw in the past time, Daksha is kind of making all these curses, and everybody's making these counter curses, but the whole time Shiva is just sitting there, undisturbed, just detached from the whole thing, and he walks out without saying anything. So again, that's his lack of envy, his impartiality. He's unperturbed by the whole thing. But yeah, further along that point of impartial, we see that like this movement, the Hare Krishna movement, Prabhupada says again and again, it's free, it's open for everyone, right? Anyone can practice bhakti, anyone can chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's pretty easy. There's no rules. We say every morning in the Shikshashtakam. There are no rules and regulations. Out of your kindness, you make it so easily for us to approach you by your holy names, hundreds and millions of holy names. It's that is auspiciousness, right? As Rupa Goswami was saying, auspiciousness is that which spreads for everyone in all parts of the world. So when we think of like humanitarian auspicious activities, actually anything we do to try and help the world, make the world a better place, separate from Krishna, right? And by our own endeavor, inevitably we exclude some group, or we bring some. Every action has its equal and opposite reaction, right? So we help some person, we take resources away from someone else. So the only auspicious act actually that we can do, the only auspiciousness, is in connection with Krishna. And so in devotional service as well, Prabhupada explains that the 9 processes of devotional service, beginning with Shravanam, Kirtanam, they are all auspicious in themselves as well. Even though Daksha is performing devotional service in ignorance, ultimately, there's this kind of gradation where I was hearing from His Holiness Swami Bhagavan Keshava Swami Maharaj, like, devotion in the mode of ignorance, we're doing these big offenses against the Vaishnavas, and that really hampers our progress, right? It really slows down our progress in devotional service. So we're taking this big kind of like, putting a big stop on our progress. Whereas if we look at Dhruv Maharaj, his devotion in the mode of passion, he's still kind of, he's being kind of distracted by the broken shards of glass kind of thing. He's getting sidetracked by things which aren't Krishna Prema, the ultimate goal of our devotional service. But he is still moving towards Krishna in a sense, and he attains his darshan of Krishna at the end of that. When we get into devotion in the mode of goodness, yes, there is still kind of like a I'm trying to purify myself. I'm trying to get established in detachment and attain these good qualities because they're conducive to my devotional service. So there is still that separation. We're not being purely subservient to the Lord, but in that sense, we're at that stage heading directly towards pure devotional service. So, yeah, we progressively we give up this lower nature, and we move more directly towards pure devotional service. But the point is that devotional service, regardless, is all auspicious, no matter who is doing it, performing it, where they perform it. Devotional service is all auspicious. We hear in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the topics of Lord Krishna are so auspicious that they purify the speaker, the hearer, and the inquirer. They are compared to the Ganges waters, which flow from the toe of Lord Krishna. Wherever the Ganges waters go, they purify the land and the person who bathes in them. Similarly, Krishna Katha, or the topics of Krishna, are so pure that wherever they are spoken, the place, the hearer, the inquirer, the speaker, and all concerned become purified. So yeah, we're all pretty fortunate to be here in Bhagavatam class this morning. This is very auspicious, despite my disqualification. The content is so pure that we are all being purified. Back to sort of like that specific verse, I found it interesting that Sati Devi is actually talking to Shiva, who is, by definition, all auspicious, and requesting him that they can go to this sacrifice, this yajna, to dress auspiciously, kind of thing. I just found that kind of a sweet irony. But Prabhupada is really asserting here that there is an appropriate way to dress, and that is something that we can honor in our progress. Like in Vedic society, there is an appropriate way to dress. In certain situations, you dress a certain way. There is a suitable kind of ornamentation that we take on. for particular scenarios. So like when we come to the temple, we wear dhoti, saris, and tilak, and we do this because it pleases Krishna, right? We don't do it because it looks cool or something, but we do it to please Krishna, and because it's appropriate, it's the suitable dress. In the same way, the jiva, when the jiva comes to this material world, we can't just come down here. We're coming here to enjoy. Krishna can, but we can't come here to enjoy separate from Krishna in our original spiritual forms. So we cover ourselves with our false ego and intelligence and mind and senses, and these things are the suitable, necessary dress for us to be functioning here in the material world. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of our Parampara Acharyas, says in his prayer to Gopinath, Sakalita Maramaya Swadhina na he ekaya. Everything here is your illusory energy, Gopinath. But this body of mine, ekaya, is swadhina, not independent. It is under the control of material nature. So we come here thinking that we can enjoy separate from Krishna. We're trying to exercise our minute independence, which we have as part and parcel of the Lord. But in the end, from the very beginning actually, we're under the control of Maya. Our bodies and our minds and everything is here functioning under the restriction of the three modes of material nature. So, what to do? What else was I going to say? I was listening to a lecture by Radheshyam Prabhu, His Grace Radheshyam Prabhu, and he was explaining a really sweet example of how in a marriage the husband actually represents the jiva and the wife represents the intelligence, the buddhi. And so we see that like when our intelligence is dovetailed or pointing towards Krishna, when our intelligence is healthy and supported and kind of controlled and sort of chased to that one-pointed goal, then we make quick advancement. But when our intelligence is neglected and when our intelligence is allowed to just kind of go wherever it wants to go and not protected in this way, it will drag us down further and further into Maya. So I think it's a really important point, right? The value of women in the Hare Krishna movement, also just in greater society. They are serving the entire family unit, the husband and the children, and I think he's saying here that they have this potential to take us all closer to Krishna if they are supported and if they themselves are sort of chaste and one-pointed in their devotional service. That has a really big impact on the entire family unit. So we see here in the verse with the wives of the Deva Rishis and the demigods dressing nicely, and that being an auspicious omen for the entire sacrifice which is happening. But yeah, I also just wanted to say, like, there's this kind of sweet contrast how Radha Gopinath every day they come out with different jewelry and decorations and ornaments and their nice dress, but we hear that actually it's not the ornaments which are beautifying Krishna, but Krishna who's beautifying the ornaments, and this is very different. This is transcendental to the auspiciousness of the dress of the wives of the demigods. Krishna is the reservoir of all beauty and all auspiciousness. Krishna actually has 4 qualities which distinguish him from Narayan, from Vishnu, and then further from Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma and the demigods. And it's his beauty which actually establishes him as the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because all other opulences actually are conquered by the opulence of beauty. If I have all the mystic powers attainable, and I have all the wealth in the world, I have all the knowledge and all renunciation, still all of these things I give to that person who captures my heart, and that is Krishna, right? Chora Griganyam Purusham Namami. Krishna is the supreme thief, and he steals the hearts of all living entities. So these are his four qualities: the performer of wonderful pastimes, the Leela Avatar. He can attract all living entities by the playing of his flute. He is surrounded by devotees endowed with wonderful love. And number 4, he is unrivaled in the excellence of beauty. So in this way, we see how Krishna not only is the reservoir of all auspiciousness, the reservoir of all beauty, but the very process of devotional service itself returns us to our original appropriate dress, our eternal Satchidananda Rupa, our form of knowledge, bliss, and eternity in relationship with Krishna, as Prakriti of Krishna, the servant of Krishna. And we see that Krishna as well, there's this kind of gradation in spiritual perfectness, right? So we know that when one comes to the Brahma Bhuta platform, they have achieved perfection of the human life, spiritual perfection, self-realization. But yeah, it's quite inconceivable, but Prabhupada explains that more perfect yet is Paramatma realization, meditation on the Supreme as the super soul, expansion within the heart of the living entity. But still more perfect than that is the Bhagavan, this perception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in himself as an individual living being, the Supreme Living Entity, but an individual who we have a sweet, distinct relationship with. But then further than that, we see that Bhagavan comes with gradations. There is Narayan, the supreme controller of the material cosmic manifestation. And with Narayan, there's this kind of impersonal relationship, because we're dealing with the controller in a sort of like God at work, right, versus God at home. So then we come to Rama, and there's still this kind of tinge of Aishwarya, opulence, kind of bowing down, which has an impersonalism to it, right? Because there is this distance which comes from that reverence. So then we go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sweetest and the most beautiful Krishna. But even Krishna himself has gradations. We see that in Dwarka, Vasudeva and Devaki, they have a relationship with Krishna where they are sometimes aware of his position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? They have this reverence for Krishna. Whereas when we move progressively from Mathura and then to Vrindavan, we see that Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mai, they relate with Krishna in this, again, inconceivable way where, despite all indication, they are so lost in their love for Krishna as an individual, as in his personal sense, all of his qualities and characteristics, that this whole idea of God and Jiva is just kind of left aside, and that is the sweetest relationship. That is the purest form of love of God. um, far beyond our conception. For me to even be talking about it is a bit ridiculous, but that is the special mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who came in Kali Yuga to deliver the fallen souls, right? He's come taking the topmost mellow Krishna in Vrindavan, this special rasa, and he's delivering it to the most fallen souls. Again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Vishayi Durjana, in his inconceivable humility, he says, this wretched fallen soul, sadakama rata, addicted to worldly desires, what is it? And no good qualities do I possess. That is an acharya in our parampara saying that. So what to speak of us, if we had such humility, maybe we could perceive some of this special rasa with Krishna. So yeah, in that way, I just want to kind of leave the class there, appreciating the beautiful dressing of Radha Gopinath this morning in their suitable dress, a very auspicious dress. Yeah, and I guess we have 10 minutes left. I don't know if I have the capacity to answer your questions, but if there are any questions or corrections, more importantly, please. Hare Krishna. Yeah, so as please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think so. Daksha and Prashruti, right? They have 16 daughters. 13 go to Dharma. One goes to Agni, the fire god. One goes to the Pitras, which is the lords of Pitraloka. So I think here Sati is seeing her sisters go with the Pitras to the yagya. I think. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Uh-huh. Yeah, well, I think maybe is it like the lords of Pitraloka are themselves demigods, but they're not like fallen, suffering in Pitraloka. I don't know. Yeah, that's my understanding. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Um, yeah, I think I'm sorry. My understanding is very mundane, and if someone would like to improve this answer, please. But I think Bhava Vibhushana was saying yesterday that Krishna um, Krishna makes his devotees more merciful than him, so that his devotees will be more glorified. So it's like, yes, in one sense it's all absolute, but it's not static. Bhakti is dynamic, and this relationship with Krishna is ever increasing in mellows and in sweetness, And so this transcendental competition between Krishna and his devotees. It's interesting, right? Because we can serve Krishna's devotees to please Krishna, and when we please Krishna, actually, in that way, when we please Krishna, then his devotees get pleased, and when his devotees get pleased, Krishna. So it's just, that's my understanding. I hope that's good. Okay. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam